Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Policki. He's Jacob Liberta. We're a Minnesota sports podcast. So if you're a Minnesota sports fan, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. And we're going to be talking Kirk Cousins today because the Vikings have their new GM. They presumably have their new head coach with Kevin O'Connell. And now it's the third piece of the trifecta at the top of the organization. So we're going to talk about what should the Minnesota Vikings do with Kirk Cousins. Obviously, he's got one more year left on his contract, coming in at a cap hit of $45 million, which is crazy high. I think it's the second highest in the NFL next season. So obviously it's going to be tough to keep him around on that number and try to improve your roster at all. So what are your thoughts here, Liberta? Do you think a trade is likely? Do you think it's likely that they maybe extend him given that O'Connell's got previous experience, coaching Kirk Cousins in Washington? What are your thoughts on the whole situation?
I really hope a trade is likely, and I think it should really be imminent. Hopefully, Kirk has played in his last even sort of game with Vikings branded uniforms with the Pro Bowl here now concluding, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to move off of him, trade him, get some draft picks back, and start fresh at the quarterback position. Just because you got a young GM, first time he's ever done this, got a young coach, first time he's ever been a head coach, and I think it just makes sense. There's a lot of logic there to taking your quarterback of the future, hopefully in this upcoming draft in the first round, or maybe you wait a year. I don't know, but you're not going to ride it out with some aging veteran who's going to make $45 million when clearly he's not even a top 10 quarterback in this league. So I think that's certainly not worth it. And then extending him does not makes even less sense, just because he'd be hitching your wagon, tying yourself to a quarterback who would finish the contract. Let's say you go add it 2 years on it or something like that. He'd be like 36 by the end of it, and that's not what you want to do when you're starting fresh as a young coach and young GM. So I think it's time to make the move. I know there's teams out there. There's got to be at least one or two that would take him on in the trade. I'm not sure what the cap ramifications look like in that, whether the Vikings probably have to eat some more money than just the $10 million that would come from the roster bonus from this previous extension he just had with the Vikings 2 years ago. But I think, it's time to move off him. I really hope we don't extend him. Otherwise, I'm going to feel kind of bleak about our future. And I know there's a lot of Kirk fans out there for sure. And he's statistically one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but it's just he doesn't pass the eye test. He just doesn't do it for me. So I think it's time to go. What are you thinking, Baylor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page as you. And, he's been good, like you said, but he hasn't done enough to get us over the top by any means. Yeah. The stats are great. Some of the highlights we have are incredible. All the deep balls he throws, especially to Jefferson and Thielen, and back when we had Diggs, that was really fun to watch, and you can appreciate that.
Sure.
When he's on, he's fantastic, but when he's off, he's just off. I mean, we saw that in that Steelers game on Thursday Night Football. Dalvin Cook goes off. Kirk looks bad from the start, and we almost blow a 29-point lead. I mean, just there's games like that. We lost to the Lions on the road where Kirk didn't really show up until late in the game. Just there's situations like that just, because you kind of can talk yourself into Kirk Cousins every year. Like, oh, if we just make this adjustment, he's such a good passer, but every year it's the same thing. He has these letdown games. That's why he ends up being a 500 quarterback. And so I think it makes so much sense with all these teams that have quarterback openings. Not everyone's going to fill it in the draft. Not everyone's going to fill it in free agency, certainly. You're going to see guys like Jimmy Garoppolo on the move, potentially Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady and Big Ben retired now. So there's already been some quarterback movement. Russell Wilson could get traded. I mean, there's going to be openings all over the NFL. And so it makes sense when, the market for a quarterback is hot right now. You got a guy that's, still, he's not old yet. He's 33, like you said. Maybe a team would want to, take a flyer on him for a couple of years. And wherever he goes, he has to sign an extension. But say it's to Cleveland with Kevin Stefanski, a guy who he's familiar with. I'm sure he'd gladly sign an extension with them. Pittsburgh Steelers are a well-run organization. I could see him wanting to sign an extension there. If there's any sort of way that he can get to San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan, undoubtedly he'd probably want to finish his career there, I would imagine. Yeah. I'm sure that's far-fetched given that they have Trey Lance, but it's such a good time to be able to trade him. You might be able to get a first-round pick for him, which would be fantastic, because if you can go into this draft with 2 first-round picks, try and move up, maybe get your quarterback if you identify say Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett, maybe Matt Corral. I know you and I are high on all three of those guys. If you can just move up and get one of them, and then you still have your other first round pick that you could potentially, draft an edge rusher or a corner or something else that can really help out your defense. So I know a lot of fans will say, well, if you get rid of Kirk, you're just risking, this whole thing going down the tubes. And it's like, well, we really weren't that far away from that anyways. I mean, 2020, we started 1-5. I mean, we were pretty much close to throwing in the towel, and we somehow come out of the bye and magically beat Green Bay at Lambeau. That kind of sparked things to get back to 500, but never could recover from there. And kind of the same story this year, a slow start to the season and just kept hovering around 500, could never get back over that mark. And so it's like, how much farther down are you really falling? I mean, this team's got talented players all over the field. You're not going to win 3 games, unless you have like a Christian Ponder, which even he won 3 games one time, I think. And that wasn't even him starting the full season. So
no, that was his rookie year.
Exactly. So like, it's pretty hard to only win like 3 or 4 games in the NFL. Given the rest of the talent on this team, I don't worry about that. So yeah, I think, long story short, I think it's time to move on from him just because I think you can get good value in return. And yes, he's been good, but it's a new era. So it's like, you can start over, you can get a draft pick, you can identify your next guy, and you can get this rebuild on the road a lot sooner than if you wait a couple of years.
Yeah. Let's even set aside Kirk for a minute. Let's talk about all the factors around Kirk and why it makes sense to trade him. If you think about it just as far as the rest of our roster goes, this doesn't feel like a team. Like, I think it's a team that could probably push the playoffs, but that's about it. Like, there's a ceiling there that with or without Kirk, we're not getting any farther than maybe one playoff win if we're really feeling lucky. So that one makes sense to stay on with him. And especially with, like I said, the new head coach, the new GM, the pressure shouldn't be there to win now. So these other teams that we could potentially get into negotiations with the trade Kirk to, these are coaches, organizations, the whole bit that they have to win right now. They like, for instance, Stefanski. Now he's been in Cleveland 2 years, so they made the playoffs. Won 11-5, was great. They won a playoff game even. So obviously the expectations and the bar was raised way higher than it was when he first came in. And then they are coming off now a lackluster season where they won, I think, 7 or 8 games and missed the playoffs. So now it's like, oh man, I better get it together now. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about my job security. So I think he would help a team like the Browns, or there's other teams out there, like, let's say, for instance, maybe even the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, they obviously have a team that can win right now. And I don't think Arians really probably wants to go through a rebuild, considering he retired once. So who knows? He might be on his way out sooner rather than later. So they might want to get a veteran quarterback they can plug and play and win right now. So I think there's a lot of teams out there that have a lot more pressure to win than the Vikings do in 2022. So I think it makes all the sense in the world to capitalize on that when they're going to be more desperate than we are to move off of them. So I think it makes all the sense in the world, like, obviously we're talking about trading Kirk. We're not even talking about like Kirk the guy or Kirk the quarterback. Like, we're just talking about how much sense it makes for teams and their windows to winning. Like, our window isn't open now, but if we trade Kirk, get draft picks, take the next guy, our window could be open by I don't know, another year or 2 from now. So I think that's certainly something people got to take into account.
Absolutely. And so I saw something today that apparently Adam Schefter said, like, after the Pro Bowl and the post-game show, he made some comment that the Vikings and Kirk Cousins are going to find a way to get something done, or the Vikings are going to find a way to do something with Kirk Cousins, something along those lines. Do you take that as like legit, like the Vikings are going to, try and extend him? Do you think the Vikings are potentially floating that out there to make teams think, oh no, we're not going to give up on Kirk, maybe try and raise that, trade compensation if teams are interested in him? How do you view that? Do you think the Vikings are truly interested in an extension, or do you think that's just smoke right now?
I think that's just smoke. I don't think there's a lot we can believe at this point. So I think we just got to wait and see. I think once we get to March, I think that'll tell us a lot more than right now after the Pro Bowl. So I think there's a lot to be hashed out. I mean, we don't even have our official head coach in the building yet. So I think there's still a lot of hashing out that needs to be done. So I could take anything Schefter says right now for really any sort of face value. So I think, that, I guess big picture, yeah. Don't read into it now, but maybe think about it in March and see where we're at once we actually have a coach. And after about a few weeks to sit and think about it, and maybe more rumors leak out. And I would just hope that this isn't true. At least I guess I think there's that part of me too that's just hoping that there's no thought of extending this guy.
Right. So before we go here, quick, what is your solution if we do move on from Kirk? Do you think you can roll with Kellen Mond and a bridge quarterback? Would you like to select a quarterback in the first round this year? Do you think that potential first rounder could be a starter right away in the league? Or do you think it's just best to, sit him behind a veteran bridge quarterback regardless? What are kind of your thoughts on the replacement option for Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, I think the lurking X factor here is Kellen Mond and what everybody beyond Zimmer in the Vikings building that is, still remains thinks of him and what he could potentially turn into. If you think he could actually be a guy in this league, and you actually think that maybe Zimmer was sitting on something that he shouldn't have been, he was just too stubborn to play him just because of his feud with Rick, that maybe you should give him a chance in the season pairing him with a bridge quarterback. But at the same time, if you don't feel that confident about it, then I think the solution's easy, and that's taking a quarterback in round one. And I am really hoping off the record for Malik Willis, but I mean, like you said, any of those top three guys that you mentioned with Pickett and Corral along with Willis would be fine. But I think I'd like to probably, regardless of what we do, drafting a quarterback in round one or not, maybe trying to make Mon the guy. I think we should sign a veteran quarterback that's going to be a lot cheaper than obviously Kirk would be at $45 million. Like, that doesn't make sense. So I think even maybe a quarterback out there like Jameis Winston. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what his market value really be this offseason. And I don't know what kind of situation he wants to find himself into. But just somebody along those lines, somebody in that pay grade that could fill a need for us for a year. I think that's probably the direction I want to go in.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend what kind of offense O'Connell wants to run. If he's going to want to be like a super pass heavy, spread it out offense, Jameis Winston might be your guy. If it's going to be more of a play action style offense that we've kind of seen here the last few years, I could see a guy like Teddy Bridgewater making a lot of sense. He would come in. I know fans, he's not that great, but he would at least come in and stabilize things. I think your team's not going to be a train wreck with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback. The Panthers were awful last season when Teddy played about half the games due to injury anyways. So, but yeah, I think Teddy would be a great, just bridge guy. Obviously he's not the long-term answer, but I'm with you on Malik Willis, man. But I have a feeling I think he's going to shoot up draft boards. Just obviously the hype at the Senior Bowl. He's just a super intriguing prospect with how athletic he is. He's got a huge arm. So I have a feeling he's going to be the first quarterback off the board, and I could see it being in the top 5, which nobody's really projecting right now. But I mean, I could see somebody moving up to go get him. I could see a surprise team like maybe the Giants taking him, just because they have Daniel Jones, but everybody knows he sucks. So I don't know. Like I think there'll be some draft surprises for sure. But my ideal world, I'm with you. A bridge quarterback, get a guy in the first round, whether it's Pickett, Corral, maybe you can somehow get Malik Willis. And then you got Kellen Mond still. And that's a 3-deep quarterback room where I'd be intrigued to see any of them play. It'll probably get to a point where the bridge quarterback, you're probably going to get sick of seeing him and you're going to want to see one of these young guys get in there, which, makes sense, especially with like Kellen Mond. It'd be nice to see in his second season, maybe see him get some playing time. But, between Mond and the first round pick, I mean, you'd have a couple intriguing quarterbacks at least, which would almost bring you back to 2017 when we had Bradford, Teddy, and Keenum all in the same quarterback room.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. And real quick, going back to the whole Teddy Bridgewater thing, I think this would be fascinating bringing him in now that both Rick and Mike are gone, the two guys who obviously led the charge to draft him in the first round back in 2014. So for him to come in this whole new dynamic, that would be very interesting. And I'd kind of like to see if he'd be open to that. I know let's go down this hypothetical path, and it obviously won't happen because Zim's out the door. But let's say Zim made it out alive in 2021 and was going to be our coach again in 2022. I have no doubt in my mind. I think Kirk would have been traded for sure. And I think Teddy Bridgewater, I think there would have been a reunion there to bring him back in the building and be the leader that we want at quarterback. And I think that's a fun thing to think about. But obviously that's not realistic, or not. That's not happening because obviously Zimmer got fired. But I just thinking about it, I think that's definitely what would have happened.
Oh, 100%. I could totally see that. Zim and Kirk did not like each other.
No.
Clearly, Zim and Spielman did not like each other either. So there's no good relationship between any of those three, I don't think, at the end. So I'll be amazed if Kirk Cousins is the only one left standing of those three going into this upcoming season. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see what they do. We'll know more, especially at combine time. That's when the rumors really start swirling here in a few
Everybody
weeks.
gets talking because all GMs get together in the same room.
Exactly. So we'll keep an eye on it. Just a fun discussion. I'm sure we'll talk about Kirk a lot more as well coming up here. But until then, that's going to do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Like I said earlier, please hit the like button and give us a subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to follow us on both Twitter and Instagram and leave your comments below. Are you a Kirk stan? Do you want to keep Kirk around? Do you think it's best to trade him and try and get some draft compensation and just start over at the position? Let us know your thoughts below. And until next time, thanks for watching.